Welcome to another Atchman Kings of War 3rd Edition Battle Report. Dwarfs versus Sylvan with Salamander allies. 3,000 points. The scenario was control. So my friend Craig played Sylvan with Salamander allies to fill up his the points in his list. So to fill out Craig's list, he went ahead and used some of his huge army of salamanders, and so he filled out his points with that, and pretty much the other stuff is what he's been playing with the rest of the time. He's done a great job on those tree leaper models and the boss wraiths, and so really like those in his army, and they're very cool. So just to go over his army real quick, we have the two hordes of salamander primes, a troop of gecko hunters, a Lachilodon, a battle captain with the aura of Pathfinder, very good unit, an army standard bearer, a boss wraith regiment, 2 regiments of hunters of the wild, 2 hordes of forest shamblers, 1 regiment of forest guards, 2 troops of tree leapers, 1 regiment of kindred glade stalkers, Elric, forest warden, an archwraith, and the Wiltfather. So my dwarf army has not been doing well. I have lost, I think, 4 or 5 games and drew 2, and I was really happy about the draws, just because I didn't want to lose again. I mean, I was really a lot of times playing for draws as opposed to trying to win, just because everything had been going so pear-shaped. So at 3,000 points, I just decided to spam Armor 6 because that seems to be one of the more reliable statistics in this game. And to that end, I took a horde of ironclads, which are actually Armor 5, with the hammer of measured force, 3 regiments of iron guard, which are Armor 6, each with throwing mastiffs, which I forgot most of, a horde of shield breakers with the Aegis of the Elohi. Not sure that was a good choice, the Aegis of the Elohi, but the horde of shield breakers did a really good job this game because I could use the iron guard to absorb the charge and then charge in with those guys and kill stuff. 3 hordes of earth elementals, 2 greater earth elementals, 2 dwarf lords on large beast. One of them has the blade of slashing and one has the blade of the beast slayer. 2 stone priests, one with the tomb of darkness. Both have bane chant and both have surge. The guy with the tomb of darkness effectively has surge 12. Then I use the army standard bearer with the loot of insatiable darkness to give me a 3rd source of bane chant, which I knew I would need because most of the Sylvan guys are armor 5, and then the great tree is armor 6. And then he took the salamander allies, which are pretty much all armor 5. They are all armor 5. So that was it for the dwarf army list. We can't stop them, my lord. Now they have allied with those filthy lizards as well. Bergio looked at his army. Their armor sparkled in the sun, but he knew that the dwarfs alone could not hold against the might of the stonewood. Bergio the bear rider turned to his 2 stone priests. Summon the rocks. Attributed to Rolf Stonelover, Jean Dietrich, historian, The War of the Woods. So just understand, just looking at the terrain on the table, that we are actually fighting a campaign. We're not playing like a tournament style battle. So the theme was terrain with a few hills for the dwarves and a few swamps and woods for the Sylvan. So that's kind of how the table turned out. We put the little tower on there, A, to keep our turn dice on available, but B, to kind of narrow the table just a little bit so that it kind of intensifies the battle. So the many of the Sylvan units can scout, and so they moved forward. They didn't move forward as far as Craig does, but they moved forward. The archers and stuff moved up on the hill. The tree guard moved up on the hill so they could get the +1 crushing when they charged down the hill at my army. And all of the tree units moved forward. Of course, these salamanders can't do that. They don't have the scout rule, so they kind of held back. So it was really a strong left for Craig, and more of a diminished or oblique right with the salamanders to hold me back there. So in deployment here, I was trying to counter. I mean, I've lost so many games with these guys. I'm trying to counter the Wiltfather and whatever stuff he's bringing with him, because everything around him is going to be elite. Plus, he's going to have the aura to take a wound off of me every turn. So I had to do something a little different than I've been doing. Down here on the extreme of my right flank, I put my first giant earth elemental, which I call Mohawk because of his mohawk on his on the model. And then next to them are my Berserker Brock Riders, which are represented by my hunting hounds. I think they're my Mordheim hunting hounds, which were a cool unit back in the day of Games Workshop. And then 3 hordes of Earth Elementals, and then in between each horde, there was like the first one was Bergio the Bear Rider, and he had the Blade of the Beast Slayer, and then the other one was just my other Earth Elemental, which I call Big Bubba. So in all of our games in the last 2-3, this is the 3rd campaign we've played, I've let Craig set up the terrain, and I don't have any opposition to terrain. I just play it the way it is. Anyway, I used to gripe and whine about it, but now I'm like, hey, I'll just make the best of it. And so, but the cool thing was that he sent me the picture, and so then I drew the terrain out on Ultimate Battle 2, placed my army in it, and then took a picture of it with a print screen, and then printed it off. And so I stuck with that deployment the whole time through, because I just thought it was such a solid deployment with all that armor 6 on the right flank, and then the hordes holding the left flank. So I thought it was a good deployment. And just to finish up, after he finished off the elementals, on the extreme left was the Dwarf Royal Enlarged Beast with the Blade of Slashing, the first Iron Guard unit. The next unit was a unit of that's my shield break. Yeah, it was a unit of shield breakers, and right behind them was the ASB with the loot, and then another unit of Iron Guard, and then the Ironclad horde, and they had the Hammer of Measured Force, just in case I ran into a bunch of those armored 5 guys, and then yet another unit of Ironclads, and they're flanked by the very first unit of Earth Elementals. So the Allied contingent actually set up on Craig's extreme right flank. So you have both units of SARS Prime, along with the Battle Captain with the Aura of Pathfinder, and behind them is an ASB. Then I believe the next unit was his Regiment of Boss Grace with the Archwraith with them as well. Next is 2 regiments of Hunters of the Wild, and then the 2 Tree Shambler or hordes or regiments, wherever they are, with the big tree behind them, and then the archers, then the spearmen. They're going to actually move forward in the first turn and get up on the hill, and lastly the tree leapers on the extreme left flank of Craig. And I think he had another unit of tree leapers behind his Boss Grace to do some interdiction, because they do fly and they're a very good unit. I mean, I don't know why people aren't using more of them, but I really like that unit, and Craig painted them great. I mean, they're just a fantastic looking group of models. Sylvan won the first turn, but elected to defer, and I think the reason why is because is my usual plan is actually to go second in any of these land grab scenarios, because I want to see where the other guy's main thrust is and try to block it. So control is very much a land grab scenario. Maybe that's really the whole reason for it. And so what I wanted to do in those cases is go second, so he forced me to go first. Pretty much I just shambled. I mean, the shambling guys obviously can't march, so they just shamble as far as forward as they can. The other dwarfs on the end, because of their little short legs, had to march forward, but stay on line. I didn't want them out of sync. The Brock Riders moved in behind one of my units, the units of Earth Elementals, and the reason why is because he did have some archers on the hill, and I didn't want to be a target. I don't think it would have helped now that I think about it, but it was just the idea of trying to get some cover, even if I didn't have cover. But now I'm in the swamp, and which is a level 1 piece of terrain, and so I am taking cover, and those guys would actually have to pay for that. So I wasn't really worried about the ironclad. I mean the big tree man, the big greater Earth Elemental, and the elementals getting shot at by shooting that doesn't have any crushing at all to it. So I know it's just kind of in vain. So anyway, that was my first turn. I was happy with it because I moved the greater Earth Elemental on the right flank over here, moved up and slightly angled him so he couldn't just rush forward, because then I would have a flank charge on some of the units. And the Stone Priest, basically, that has Surge 12, is over there close enough range to go ahead and move that guy. So I mean, like I said, it was a good first turn. The my left flank, I don't know if I could beat those uh, salamanders over there, but I thought I'd give it a try with my stalwart dwarves. So here you can see it's just a close-up of my stalwart dwarves. This is the whole dwarf flank, and they end up fighting the allied contingent, not actually fighting the Sylvan contingent. So um, I was really happy, with the checkerboarding with the armor 6 guys, because the shield breakers, they only have armor 4, and they could actually be trouble against any of those Salamander Prime units. And so I was pretty happy with how the plan pulled out here in the early turns. Okay, over here on my right flank, he moved his unit of tree leapers forward. I don't really know why. I guess maybe he was trying to sucker me in front of the some of those units that could occupy me. Everything else moved forward fairly far. Like I say, I was in this game. I was really stunned that he let me charge him so early. And in the past, I have charged him early, and I've lost all those games. So I really had to think twice about this. The Salamander Primes on the far flank are looking very intimidating, and so I was really scared about the normal dwarves over there. But I did have those armor 6 units interweaved with them to take the charge, and then the dwarfs to be able to charge back in. Instead of having chaff, I just had armor 6 regiments that would take the hit. Even if they died in the turn, it's still just acting like chaff. And their points are low enough that it's not too bad. What I did forget was the mastiffs on all those guys. I think I shot 1 unit of mastiffs the whole game. That was just a waste of points. I mean, if I'm not going to use them, I might as well just not take them. So here you can see both battle lines arrayed in the end of turn 1. Everybody's pretty much squared up, and so it's going to take some concentration of force to break through the lines. And he has got rock solid leadership and rock solid armor and stuff all down his line. So this is going to be very difficult, and this is where I've suffered in the previous games, is not really doing well in this early turn, and either getting charged or charging and not breaking units, and then disaster happens. So we'll have to see what happens in turn 2. So down here on my right flank, I went ahead and charged the greater earth elemental into the flank of the tree guys, and I don't really know why they were there except to maybe pull me out so that they could get a good charge down the hill with the forest guard, because of their crushing for charging off the hill. And the Brock Riders just moved up behind one of the units of elementals, and I actually did a triple charge on the rightmost unit of forest shamblers. Charged in first with the dwarf on large beast that had the blade of the beast slayer, because that way he would be basically wounding him on anything he hit. And then both units, and then 2 units of regular elementals. And then next to them there was a unit of hunters of the whatever they are, and then I used all my surge to charge into that unit just to keep it occupied so it couldn't flank into my earth elementals. Over on the other side, I just kind of held pat. I mean, it wasn't really refusing a flank, but I edged all the armor 6 units forward, so they had to be the first one that they hit, and I think that worked out. So I have to see what happens after the melee. So here on the left flank, you see I knew I was going to take the charge from the Salamander Prime, so I had jiggled all of the armor 6 guys forward to be able to take that initial hit. So how Pathfinder really wasn't in that great a position. I mean, I knew I was going to get hit a bunch, so but I figure armor 6 can stand up to it, and plus I had a general and an ASB over there on that side to be able to hold fast. You can see in the middle here that you can see all the results of my charges with the earth elementals and the use of surge to trap that units of hunters of the wild on the right hand side. I probably could charge the left one, but I was trying not to get flanked. It didn't work, but I tried not to get flanked. So anyway. Okay, so over here on my right flank, the tree leapers died horrendously, and I was able to just pivot the greater earth elemental and the other earth elemental horde toward the units on the hill. One of the units of forest shamblers died, and that put me in a really good position there. And also, with a fluke of great dice rolling, I killed another unit of Hunters of the Wild, and so now I've blown the middle out. And so really all that's in the middle right now is the Forest Shamblers and the Wilt Father. But sometimes with the Wilt Father that's enough, because he is a tough son of a gun. And that was the end of my turn 2. So over here on my left flank, a unit of Salamander Primes and the Gecko Hunters charged into one of my units of Iron Guard, and I think they did 5 wounds to it, which is very respectable considered the armor of my unit. He didn't charge. We had kind of a consternation here about how the units could fit in, and so what I did is I just nudged my units over. I mean, we're playing a friendly game. There's no reason to play ticky-tacky in this game, and let him go ahead and charge into my other unit of Iron Guard over on the extreme left flank. So on the left-hand side here, the regiment of Boskwraith charged in the flank of the elementals over there. All those green dice are the wounds inflicted by the Wilt Father. In the front of that unit was charged by Hunters of the Wild. The Greater Earth Elemental had taken a wound, and something charged him. I can't remember what it was. And then the next unit of elementals they were just cleared out what was in front of them. The Tree Leapers jumped over my lines and was going to go after one of my Stone Priests, the one with the Surge 12, excuse me, which I didn't like at all. The Wilt Father, because of his angle, I rolled a 6 to overrun with the Dwarf on a large beast, and sure enough, he got charged in the flank by the Wilt Father and charged in the flank by the archers. That was not good. I just want to point that out to you. So here you can see the entire turn from the Sylvan and Salamanders. The Forest Guard went ahead and charged down the hill at the, along with Elric, had charged into my Greater Earth Elemental. Not sure that was a good idea or not. This is after the end of the turn, and so the Dwarf Lord on Large Beast is dead. Now they're turned to face. The archers turn to face the horde of elementals, and the middle is still a scrum because despite all the swings, and I want to say there was 55 swings on my elementals, they held out over there on the left flank. Now they were damaged. They weren't just like unscathed, but those guys did a good job of holding the elemental flank, and then all the dwarves on the extreme left actually held up to the initial charge of the Salamander Primes as well. So a little better picture showing the end of the turn 2 of the Salamanders and Sylvan Alliance. Like I said, you can see there where the Boskwraiths, and they have an ungodly amount of attacks. I want to say it was 50 attacks. They did most of the damage to the unit of elementals, but the Hunters of the Wild came in, did 1 or 2, but that wasn't going to break me because I already had Inspiring next to them, and was really in a good position there. But you can also see where the Tree Leapers had jumped the line and was actually going after one of my Stone Priests, which I did not like at all because that was my good Stone Priest. So down here on the right flank, the Greater Earth Elemental went ahead and charged back into the Hunters of the Wild and did some pretty grievous wounds to them. I don't know why I thought about it, but I didn't think I swung enough times at at Elric, because I had 26 attacks. I don't really remember if I rolled enough dice. I think I did 2 or 3 wounds, which is pretty good considering I was hindered. No, I wasn't hindered because I used my. I went ahead and popped my Strider thing. The unit of Earth Elementals charged into the unit of archers, and they survived. I didn't roll really well on those guys. So everything else is just a general scrum in the middle. Over on the left flank, there's just so much intense stuff going on with me charging back into his units. This is just a close-up of my right flank. You can see Elric was a little off, and that's what caused my, because they did the double charge, it really kept my dogs from running into the side. Even if I killed Elric, I don't think I could have moved into his other unit because I was either being blocked by my own elementals or being blocked by the Greater Earth Elemental. So that was a good plan to keep me from heading into him, but I really, for some reason, think I did not roll enough dice, and I probably should have popped Elric in one go. But that's how it is. Sometimes you start to play a battle and you forget stuff. Up on this end, the Gecko Hunters and the one of the units of Salamander Primes charged into the Iron Guard that were up there, because I had them stuck out front and they were the easiest ones to get to, and I'd protected the unit of Iron Breakers from getting charged because I knew how much wider his units were. So all he had to do was nudge one of the units of Iron Guard out in front. So then he had to, but he got a double charge. He did 5 wounds, but I mean, I really don't think that was going to take down that unit of Iron Breakers in one go. I mean, I'm sorry, Iron Guard in one go. So my whole left flank, it held this turn. I mean, I took some wounds from stuff, but it really was kind of inconsequential considering what I had over there. So my unit of Iron Guard slammed into the flank of the Bosk Wraiths. I call it slam. I mean, it's 24 attacks for 4s and 4s. So, I mean, they should have done significant damage. His Bosk Wraiths aren't very heavily armored. The Earth Elementals simply charged right back into the Hunters of the Wild. Big Bubba and a unit of, Earth Elementals double charged the unit of Forest Shamblers, while the other elementals just countercharged back into those archers. The Stone Priest in the that's here in the foreground, he just simply moved out of the way of the tree leapers, because I mean, those guys are wicked little suckers, and so have to watch out for them. And I don't want to lose my Stone Priest, because having that Surge 12 is a huge tactical advantage. So over here on the right hand side, the Greater Earth Elemental and the Horde of Elementals destroyed that unit of Forest Shamblers, and I turned the Earth Elementals to protect the flank of the Greater Earth Elemental from the Bosk Wraith, not the Bosk Wraith, the Wiltfather, and I inflicted grievous wounds to the unit of Hunters of the Wild with my Elementals, and despite my flank charge on the unit of Bosk Wraiths, I think I rolled like a 3 or something, and they held out. I would have thought that they would have been gone. So the Ironclad unit went ahead and charged into the Gecko Warriors and broke them, and overran a die 6 inches into the other side of the table, which I was pretty happy about. The Iron Guard and the Shield Breakers charged into a unit of Salamander Primes, and while I didn't break them, I did a lot of damage to them. It was a good charge, but I never could get the whole game I never got Banechant off on that unit, even though I have basically dedicated a model to getting that unit Banechant. Over on the extreme left, I just did not engage, because the way that everything was set up, he couldn't get to me because of in the next turn he couldn't get to me because of the overhang of each unit. He's so packed in together, my bases are smaller. I'm actually safe from being charged, at least for the time being. So in the Sylvan turn, we got kind of the only rules debate we had in this whole game. To see the unit there, the Salamander Primes, could charge my Shield Breakers in the flank, but couldn't because there's no way they could fit. And so they weren't a legal charge, even though that my base was actually slightly in front of them. And so what I did, like I say, we're playing a friendly game. I just moved them over because it seemed kind of unfortunate that they couldn't charge my unit of Iron Guard on the left flank because of a smidge of my base. And he's got 3 units that he literally can charge, but because of fitting, he didn't. So and plus he's on a little bit wider. Well, he's maybe his on the right base size. But I just moved over my Shield Breakers over and just let him go ahead and charge the unit over there. Wasn't really that scared of that unit anyway, because of hitting on 4s and stuff. I'm not as terrified of those kinds of units. And so in his other turn, he charged back into, and I think he charged back into the Iron Guard because they had 5 wounds on them. He thought they could break them. And so I think he charged back into them and ignored the Shield Breakers. I don't know if I have a picture of it, but I'm pretty sure that the Salamander Prime unit did kill the Iron Guard unit this turn. They started out with 5 wounds, and I think he rolled a high number of hits and a really high number of wounds, and then he rolled a really good morale check and took those guys out. But I mean, their job was to keep that unit off of me excuse me, while so that I could get my shield breakers, which are one of my better fighty units, into to that against that unit of Salamander primes. Everything else in the middle just kind of countercharged again. His boss grace countercharged into the Iron Guard instead of fighting again in the flank of the Earth Elementals. His Wilt Father charged my, excuse me again, I'm sorry, and charged my unit of elementals there. Like I said, I had it set up so you really couldn't get to the flank of my greater Earth Elemental. And I think his archers just charged back. No, his archers were wavered in the last turn, so they just kind of stuck over there on the right-hand side. So you can see here what I was talking about, the Wilt Father charging into my unit of elementals there. The over on the right flank, I just continued to fight the, I believe I actually killed Elric this turn. And then the Greater Earth Elemental was still fighting down that unit of Iron Guard. No, sorry, Forest Guard. So I think that battle just continued on because I don't think I rolled especially well when I was attacking that unit. Yes, Forest Guard were only up to 6 wounds. Like I said, I must not have rolled especially well. And Elric was at 3 wounds. So over here on the left flank, yes, my Iron Guard did in fact die, but that left me open for another charge in with my shield breakers. The crazy thing is he shot his Lacheladon at my unit of Dwarfs there and freaking rolled a boxcar and wavered him. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, my God, he only taken 3 wounds the whole game and I get wavered. Over here on the extreme left, he charged in, and I think the same thing. I think he rolled a really good dice roll and managed to waver my Dwarfs despite it did. I think he did roll roll. He maybe did like 8 or 9 wounds. So I guess that's a respectable thing with that unit there. But I'm in a good position now, maybe to route that unit out of the middle in my turn, and then also, even though I'm wavered, I still have the special rule so that I could potentially roll and still charge into his Lacheladon. Alright, I'm really trying to break the game open right here. The Greater Earth Elemental, Big Bubba, went ahead and charged into the flank of the Hunters of the Wild, and they were already pretty wounded. The Iron Guard, of course, charged right back into the units of Boss Grace. My unit of Elementals there countercharged into the Wilt Father. I mean, I wasn't holding my breath there that was going to be a good outcome. But same thing with the unit of Elementals charging into the archers there. Okay, over here in Lizard Land, the shield breakers charged into the other unit of Salamander primes, and they're pretty beat up, and shield breakers are pretty effective unit. Hitting on 3s and wounding those guys on 4s, I mean, that's not the best in the game, but it's certainly not horrible. I didn't do anything over here on the extreme left with the, yeah, I did. I went ahead and charged the Dwarf Lord on Large Beast into that melee because, I mean, I figured he had to choose one unit or the other, and he'd probably choose the unit that was already wounded to attack on the next turn. So that just gives me another whole turn of delaying action. And that's kind of how I like to use those models. I know they're only like 190 points. They're not so expensive that you can't just sacrifice one to hold somebody off for a while. So, I mean, I always hate to lose my Lord heroes, so to speak, but I've grown less attached to units in this game than I did in my Warhammer days. My unit of Ironclads passed their roll and was able to charge into his Lacheladon there that was in the swamp. Yeah, so this turn the Dwarf army brought the pain. Elric died, the unit of Forest Guard died, and Mohawk, the Greater Earth Elemental, went ahead and was trapezing into that other quarter over there. For some reason, I don't remember why, but the archer unit, I must have just rolled crap, but I think they were wavered again for my Earth Elementals fighting them. I did inflict a few wounds on the Wilt Father, but not very many. But the most significant thing was essentially that the entire middle was gone except for a Forest Warden, and because the Boss Graiths died, the Hunters of the Wild died, and then I just overran as far as I could. And I probably shouldn't have overran with the tree with the greater earth elemental, because I'm pretty sure I get charged in the flank and destroyed here probably the next turn. So anyway, I mean, I've really opened the game up. There's really nothing on the right side except those archers who are doomed because of just keeping getting wavered every turn. So I didn't break anything on the left side this turn, but I have inflicted grievous damage to both units of Salamander primes. I mean, that one there is up to 14, and I think the one next to it's up to 15. I've taken 11 because one thing about shield breakers, if they don't break you, the armor and stuff is not very good. I mean, they hit hard, but they're kind of a glass hammer. So down, like I said, on the very far left here, I mean, I did a lot of wounds and a lot of damage, but I didn't manage to break anybody this turn. I forgot about the tree leapers. I thought maybe he was just going to move over into the corner and try to take that quarter away from me, but instead he charged my Brock Riders in the flank and just wiped them out. I mean, it was a great bunch of dice rolls and a really unfortunate break test for me, but that was it for the Brock Riders. So then I really had to think about what was going to happen the rest of the game since those guys were in my backfield. I had taken a lot of wounds from that Wilt Father. I mean, he was just dropping stuff everywhere on me. So as you can see, the Wilt Father had disengaged from my other elementals, had charged into my greater earth elemental, and I think into his flank. So I don't really remember these turn sequences over here on the left. I apologize, but what happened was the shield breakers did eventually wipe out that unit of SARS primes, and the SARS primes on this far flank eventually killed the Iron Guard that were in front of them. My unit of dwarfs there in the middle had swept through the Lacheladon to take that particular third of the table over there with their unit strength. So pretty sure this is pretty much how the battle ended on this flank, because I don't think that unit of Salamander primes went down, and I just held back the shield breakers because with the Lord there and the shield breakers, I had more unit strength in that particular third of the table anyway. So yeah, I did lose my greater earth elemental to the charge from the Wilt Father. Wilt Father's a nasty dude. But what I did manage to do in the next turn is use all my surge and surge my other unit of earth elementals into his rear, and did an ungodly amount of damage, because I think I threw I also had Bane Chant on him too. That's what the little orange flame thing is behind him. I never know what to use it for, so that's what I use it for, is Bane Chant. So I went ahead and charged him in the rear and just destroyed him. I mean, it wasn't even close. I've done so much damage, and I think I rolled a 9 and an 11 on the break test, so he was gone. And that was the big threat to the middle. His Forest Warden and his Archwraith had charged into my unit of elementals there, and I had taken a bunch of damage from them. But I mean, they didn't have any unit strength. Even if they killed the unit, they really wouldn't help the cause any at all. So this is the last picture of the game. My earth elementals had turned back toward the tree leapers just to kind of stop them up, but it didn't matter where they moved. I could have at least negated him in one corner with the greater earth elemental, and then I easily dominated this section. It must have been I mean, I think he could have went someplace, but it really didn't matter, because either way I was going to get a point, either from this part of the table down here or from him negating the greater earth elemental. So in the end, I had a pretty decent victory. I won the game 4-0, as Craig didn't have enough unit strength to actually take any of the quarters. And over on the far left side, I had enough unit strength to negate his unit of Salamander primes. And so therefore, I mean, it was a 4-0 victory, the first victory for these stupid dwarves. Wow, it only took me like 7 or 8 games to finally win my first battle with dwarves. That army has some serious problems, or at least it doesn't fit my playing style. Let's just say it that way. I'm not downing the army, because I've lost to them plenty of times, mostly because of not really knowing all the stuff they do. And now that I've played them, it's given me some perspective on maybe how to beat them in the future, and what traps to avoid, and what kind of pitfalls that you have. The design of this list was to max armor 6, and to be able to take the charge and then flank or be able to countercharge. Because like some of my units, like the shield breakers, they're armor 4, and against almost anything in that army, they're going to be armor 3 because of all the crushing strength that's in that Sylvan army, or just the sheer amount of attacks was going to overcome them. So I just used the armor 6 guys as a checkerboard all the way down the table, and it held some units back so they couldn't be charged, and then moved forward into the fight. But it really worked out better than I thought it was going to work out, this plan. I had actually taken the army and put it on Ultimate Battle, and drew a map out of how I wanted to deploy, and I was trying not to look at what Craig was doing, so because I didn't want to change it, because I was pretty sure I had a good plan with the checkerboarding the armored 6 guys. That seemed like it was going to work no matter what. I mean, no matter what he deployed. The thing is, I didn't want to have happen. I didn't want him to deploy his Wiltfather and those stinking forest shamblers over here on the flank where the dwarfs were, because I didn't really have anything for them. I mean, they were just going to kill me. And but instead, he lined up his strength against my strength, and I actually had more units of strength than he did in the middle. And I really got lucky on the turn that I got to charge him, because I took out 2 key units out of his middle part of his army, because of I wiped out a unit of Hunters of the Wild that was protecting the flanks of his unit of Forest Shamblers, and then I wiped out one of the units of Forest Shamblers, and that left the Wiltfather kind of by himself against the rest of the storm. Craig sacrificed his archers and his forest guard to try to keep me from getting around the Wiltfather and killing him, which was a masterful move. But eventually I got him with the use of Surge in the very last 1 or 2 turns of the game. So the plan worked successfully. Like I said, when I just look at this dwarf army, I'm kind of thinking of when I played Games Workshop dwarfs, where basically you charge dwarves and they never break. Well, they're not that much different than any other army in this game. So, except that they're horribly slow, and they just don't have a lot of hittiness unless you're using all of these gigantic earth elementals and stuff like that. Or it doesn't seem to me that way. Maybe I haven't tried all the models I could possibly use yet, but they just don't. They just seem to lack a certain amount of hittiness that. You charge your shield breakers in, which is probably your best damage infantry, and they're still just slightly above average. They're not, they're not just a killer like some of the stuff in my Bissell army. I mean, my Molochs charge into something, it's gone in 2 turns at the most. Boom. These guys are just more of a grind army, and they're just not particularly good at grinding to me unless you go with armor 6. So maximizing out the armor 6, I actually had my unit of old dwarf miners that I used for one of my Iron Guard units, and then I had some Iron Breakers, I think is what they were called. Enough models to make 2 little blocks of Iron Breakers there, and that was okay. And the other models I bought from other people, but I was able to put together an all-painted dwarf army, which was one of my focuses for this, because I don't like my battle reports to have. I mean, I have had some battle reports where I have some unpainted, and in one case even unprimed figure on the table, but I don't really like that. So I'm just trying to do some nice battle reports, keep everything up, and see how it goes. But I was really happy to win my first game. Craig wanted a rematch, and I told him I'm going to put this army in the damn box, and they're going to retire on the low note that they're in, because, like I said, I think out of 8 games I've won 1. So I've like 1 win, 2 draws, and 4 or 5 losses. I don't know what it is, but I've just not had very much luck with them, except for when I went to the armor 6. That's when I got my draws. Was just using more armor 6 guys in the list, and even though there's some other units, versatile units in the list, they're just not. I mean, when you start to point them out and look at them, it's just easier to spam the armor 6 and don't worry about their special abilities and stuff. Let people charge you and then flank them. I mean, it just seems the best way to be. So anyway, that's my thoughts on the dwarf army. Not a particular fan of it, I have to say, but I finally won a game, and I'm pretty damn happy about that.